Ezra's world shattered the night his mother's heart stopped. At 17, he stood in the sterile hospital room. Her sketchbooks, her life's work clutched to his chest, as if they could anchor him to her fading warmth. By dawn, he was an orphan, adrift in a city that felt too big and too cold without her. Seattle's rain-soaked streets mirrored his grief as he packed his life into a battered suitcase. His mother, Lila, had been his everything, his confidant, his muse, the one who'd celebrated his coming out at 15 with a quiet pride that made him feel invincible. Now, with her gone, Ezra had no choice but to move across the country to live with his father, Tom, a man he barely knew. Tom had left when Ezra was 5, a blurry memory of work boots and a pickup truck fading into the horizon. Now, Tom lived in a small Ohio town, a place called Willow Creek, with his girlfriend, Carla, in a house Ezra had never seen. The bus ride from Seattle to Ohio was a 48-hour blur of bad coffee and worse memories. Ezra sketched in his notebook to keep the panic at bay, drawing his mother's face over and over her warm brown eyes, her crooked smile. When the bus finally pulled into Willow Creek, Ezra stepped into a town that felt like it belonged to another era: faded diners, pickup trucks, and American flags flapping in the humid September breeze. Tom was waiting at the station, his broad shoulders hunched, his face lined with years Ezra hadn't witnessed. "Hey, kid," Tom said, his voice gruff, offering a handshake instead of a hug. Ezra took it, feeling the calluses of a man who built things for a living. The house was a modest 2-story with peeling paint and a front porch cluttered with Carla's gardening tools. Carla greeted Ezra with a tight smile, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. "Welcome," she said, but her eyes scanned him like he was a problem to be solved. Inside, the house smelled of pot roast and Lysol, a stark contrast to the incense and paint fumes of his mother's apartment. Ezra's room was a converted attic, cramped but clean, with a single window overlooking the neighbor's overgrown yard. He unpacked his sketchbooks, his clothes, and a small rainbow flag his mother had sewn for him. It felt like a relic now, a quiet rebellion against the unknown. That first week, Ezra tried to find his place. Tom was a construction foreman, gone most days, leaving Ezra with Carla, who ran a daycare from the living room. Her rules were rigid: no shoes indoors, no loud music, no leaving dishes in the sink. Ezra kept his head down, sketching in the attic or wandering Willow Creek's quiet streets. He noticed the way people stared: his curly hair, his ripped jeans, the way he carried himself. "City kid," they'd mutter, as if it explained everything. At school, Ezra was the new kid at Willow Creek High, a sprawling brick building where football reigned supreme. He kept to himself, sketching in the cafeteria, until he met Jamie. Jamie was a senior, lean and wiry, with a shock of black hair and a grin that felt like sunlight. He was the kind of person who could talk to anyone, and he chose Ezra. "You're the artist, right?" Jamie said one day, sliding into the seat across from him. "Saw you drawing in English. That was dope." Ezra blushed, and used to a tension that wasn't laced with judgment. Jamie was openly gay, a fact that made him both a legend and an outcast in Willow Creek. He'd grown up here, knew every back road and every secret, and he wasn't afraid to call out the jocks who whispered slurs behind his back. "They're just scared of what they don't get," Jamie told Ezra over slushies at the gas station. "You gotta own who you are, or this place will eat you alive." Ezra wanted to believe him, but the weight of his mother's absence made owning anything feel impossible. Back at home, Carla's rules grew stricter. She didn't like Ezra's late-night sketching, the way he'd lose himself in his art until midnight. "You're not in Seattle anymore," she'd snap. "We have structure here. Tom, caught between them, said little. His silence a wall Ezra couldn't climb. But Ezra felt the tension building, like a storm gathering over the flat Ohio horizon. One evening, as Ezra helped with dishes, Carla noticed the rainbow flag pinned to his backpack. Her face tightened. "What's that?" she asked, her voice sharp. Ezra's heart raced, but he squared his shoulders. "It's mine," he said simply. "It's who I am." Carla's eyes narrowed, and Tom, standing in the doorway, looked away. That night, Ezra overheard them arguing, Carla's voice low and venomous. Tom's resigned. "I don't care what he thinks he is," Carla hissed. "No gays under my roof." Ezra's hands shook as he sat on his attic bed, the words carving into him. He thought of his mother, how she'd fought for him to be proud, to be himself. He thought of Jamie, fearless and unapologetic. And he knew, as the rain began to fall outside, that he couldn't stay silent. Not here. Not now. The next morning, Ezra woke to the sound of Carla's daycare kids shrieking downstairs. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her words echoing, "No gays under my roof." It wasn't just rejection, it was a declaration of war. He wanted to confront her, to demand she see him, but fear knotted his stomach. Instead, he grabbed his sketchbook and headed to school, where Jamie was waiting. "You look like you saw a ghost," Jamie said, leaning against Ezra's locker. His hazel eyes sparkled with concern, and Ezra felt a pull he hadn't expected. He told Jamie everything: Carla's ultimatum, Tom's silence, the suffocating weight of the house. Jamie listened, his jaw tight. "That's messed up," he said. "But you don't have to take it. You're stronger than that." Jamie invited Ezra to his place after school, a small apartment he shared with his older sister, Mia, a tattoo artist with a laugh that filled the room. Their home was chaos in the best way, walls covered in Mia's sketches, music blasting, dishes piled high. It felt like his mother's apartment, like a place where he could breathe. Over pizza, Jamie told Ezra about his own coming out, how his parents had kicked him out at 16, how Mia had taken him in. "Family's what you make it," Jamie said, his hand brushing Ezra's. The touch sent a jolt through him, equal parts terror and thrill. At school, Ezra and Jamie grew closer. They'd sit under the bleachers, sharing earbuds and stories. Jamie talked about his dream to move to Chicago, to live where he could be himself without apology. Ezra showed Jamie his sketches, portraits of his mother, of Seattle's skyline, of Jamie's crooked smile. "You're good," Jamie said, his voice soft. "Like, really good." Ezra's cheeks burned, but for the first time since his mother's death, he felt seen. But home was a different story. Carla's rules tightened like a noose. She banned Ezra from the living room when her daycare kids were there, claiming his attitude was disruptive. Tom tried to mediate, but his attempts were half-hearted, his eyes avoiding Ezra's. One night, Ezra found a pamphlet on his bed, some church group's conversion therapy program. The glossy paper promised to fix him. He tore it to pieces, his hands shaking with rage, and stuffed the scraps under his mattress. The breaking point came at dinner. Carla had made meatloaf, the air thick with tension. Ezra, emboldened by Jamie's courage, wore a rainbow pin on his jacket. Carla's eyes locked onto it. "Take that off," she said, her voice low. "Not in my house." Ezra's pulse thundered. "It's not your house," he said. "It's my dad's. And I'm his son." Tom froze, fork halfway to his mouth. Carla's face reddened. "You think you can just waltz in here and change everything?" She snapped. I won't have that lifestyle under my roof. Then maybe I shouldn't be under your roof. Ezra shot back, his voice trembling but firm. He stood, chair scraping, and stormed to the attic. Tom followed, his heavy steps creaking on the stairs. Ezra, wait, he said, his voice raw. I don't know how to do this. Ezra turned, tears burning his eyes. Do what? Dad. Be my father. Or accept who I am. Tom's mouth opened, but no words came. He looked like a man drowning in his own silence. Ezra spent the night sketching, pouring his anger into jagged lines and shadowed faces. He drew Carla's sneer, Tom's averted eyes, and Jamie's grin, a beacon in the dark. By morning, he'd made a decision. He couldn't stay in a house that rejected him, but he wouldn't run either. He'd fight for himself, for his mother's memory, for the life he deserved. Ezra's rebellion started small but deliberate. He wore his rainbow pin to school, pinned it to his backpack, let it shine like a challenge. Jamie noticed immediately, his grin wide. Look at you, owning it, he said, slinging an arm around Ezra's shoulders. The touch felt like armor, and Ezra leaned into it, his heart racing with something new hope. Maybe, or something deeper. At school, their friendship blossomed into something more. Stolen glances in the hallway, notes slipped into lockers, a brush of fingers during study hall. Jamie invited Ezra to a local art show, a small gallery in a nearby town where queer artists showcased their work. The night was electric paintings of defiant love, sculptures of broken chains, music that pulsed with freedom. Ezra felt his mother's spirit there, in the colors and the courage. He kissed Jamie under a streetlight on the way home, a quick, clumsy press of lips that left them both laughing and breathless. Your trouble, Jamie whispered, but his eyes said he didn't mind. Back in Willow Creek, the tension at home escalated. Carla's glares were constant now, her comments barbed. You're confusing the kids, she'd say about her daycare charges, as if Ezra's existence was a threat. Tom tried to keep the peace, but his efforts were feeble, like a man patching a sinking ship with tape. Ezra overheard Carla pressuring Tom to send him to that church program, her voice low and insistent. It's for his own good, she said. Tom's silence was louder than any answer. Ezra found refuge with Jamie and Mia. Mia, with her sharp wit and inked arms, became a surrogate sister, teaching Ezra how to stand tall. People like Carla, she said, they're scared of what they can't control. Don't let her define you. Ezra nodded, but the weight of Carla's rejection and Tom's inaction gnawed at him. He started staying out later, sketching with Jamie at the park or crashing on Mia's couch. Each night away felt like a step toward freedom, but also a step away from the father he'd hoped to know. One afternoon, Ezra returned home to find his sketchbooks rifled through, pages torn. Carla stood in the kitchen, arms crossed. I was cleaning, she said, unapologetic. Those drawings, they're inappropriate. Ezra's vision blurred with fury. You had no right, he said, voice shaking. Those were my mom's. And mine. Carla's lips curled. This is my house, she said. If you don't like it, leave. Ezra didn't wait for Tom to intervene. He grabbed his backpack and left, the door slamming behind him. He walked to Jamie's, tears mixing with the Ohio drizzle. Jamie held him, no words needed, just the steady warmth of his presence. You can stay here, Jamie said. Mia's cool with it. But Ezra knew it wasn't a solution. He couldn't keep running. He needed to confront the truth about Carla, about Tom, about himself. That night, Ezra sat with Jamie and Mia, planning his next move. He'd heard about a youth shelter in Columbus, a place for queer kids with nowhere else to go. It was a last resort, but the idea of a place where he could be himself felt like a lifeline. Yet the thought of leaving Tom, of giving up on the father he'd barely begun to understand, tore at him. He wanted to believe Tom could change, could choose him. But time was running out. Ezra spent the next week at Jamie's, sleeping on the couch, his sketchbooks his only constant. Mia cooked him pancakes, teased him about his bedhead, but her eyes held a quiet worry. "You can't hide here forever," she said one morning. "You gotta face it, kid." Ezra knew she was right, but the thought of returning to Carla's house made his chest tight. He missed his attic room, the view of the neighbor's yard, even Tom's awkward attempts at connection. But Carla's words, "no gaze under my roof," were a wall he couldn't breach. Jamie was his anchor. They spent evenings exploring Willow Creek's hidden corners, a rusted bridge over the creek, an abandoned barn where they painted their initials in spray paint. Jamie talked about his future, about art school, about a life where they could be together without fear. Ezra wanted that life, but doubt crept in. Could he build something new when his past felt so broken? One night, Ezra's phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Come home. We need to talk." Ezra stared at the words, his heart a tangle of hope and dread. Jamie urged him to go. "You'll regret it if you don't," he said, squeezing Ezra's hand. So Ezra went, stepping into the house like a soldier entering a battlefield. Tom was in the living room, alone, a beer in his hand. Carla was at a church meeting, he said. The air felt heavy, charged with things unsaid. "I'm sorry," Tom started, his voice rough. "I haven't been. I don't know how to be your dad." Ezra's throat tightened. "You could start by standing up for me," he said. Tom flinched, but he nodded. "I know. Carla's got her beliefs. I don't agree, but it's her house too." Ezra's anger flared. "Her house? What about me? I'm your son." Tom's eyes met his, raw and pained. "I want you here," he said. I need time." Time. Ezra wanted to scream that he didn't have time, that he was drowning in Carla's hate and Tom's indecision. But he saw something in his father's face, a flicker of the man who'd once loved his mother, who'd left but maybe hadn't wanted to. "I'm gay, Dad," Ezra said, his voice steady. "That's not changing. Can you handle that?" Tom didn't answer, but he reached out, his hand hovering before resting on Ezra's shoulder. It was the closest they'd come to a hug. The next day, Carla returned, her eyes cold. She'd heard about the argument, about Ezra staying with Jamie. "If you choose that life," she said, "you're choosing to leave." Ezra looked at Tom, waiting for him to speak, to fight for him. But Tom's silence was deafening. Ezra grabbed his bag and walked out, his heart breaking with every step. He went to the youth shelter in Columbus, a converted warehouse with murals on the walls and kids like him, queer, displaced, resilient. The staff were kind, offering him a bed and a hot meal. Ezra sketched the other kids, their stories spilling out in late-night talks, runaways, dreamers, survivors. He thought of his mother, how she'd taught him to find beauty in broken things. He thought of Jamie, who texted him every day, promising to visit. But Ezra couldn't shake the ache for his father. He wrote Tom a letter, pouring out his pain, his hope, his love. He didn't know if Tom would read it, but it felt like a step toward healing. As he sealed the envelope, he vowed to build a life where he could be whole, gay, an artist, a son, a lover. Ezra's life at the Columbus shelter became a rhythm of survival and discovery. The other kids taught him how to navigate the city, how to find free art classes, how to laugh even when the world felt heavy. Jamie visited every weekend, bringing sketchpads and stories, his presence a reminder that love could be a home. They'd walk the Scioto River, dreaming of a future where they could live openly, their hands entwined without fear. Ezra's sketches grew bolder, filled with color and defiance, each stroke a reclaiming of himself. One evening, a letter arrived from Tom. Ezra's hands trembled as he opened it. Tom's handwriting was messy, the words halting but raw. "I'm sorry I failed you. I'm trying to understand. I want to be your dad, if you'll let me." He'd included a photo of himself and Ezra's mother, young and laughing, a reminder of a time before the world had pulled them apart. Ezra cried, not from sadness, but from the possibility of something new. He called Tom, their first real conversation in weeks. "I don't need you to be perfect," Ezra said. "I just need you to try." Tom's voice cracked. "I'm trying, kid. I promise." He'd left Carla, he said, moved into a small apartment. The house was hers now, her rules, her walls. Tom wanted Ezra to come back, to start over. Ezra hesitated, the shelter's warmth tempting. But Jamie's words echoed, "Family's what you make it." Ezra returned to Willow Creek. Not to Carla's house, but to Tom's new Placia cramped apartment with mismatched furniture and a view of the town's water tower. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Tom hung Ezra's sketches on the walls, a quiet gesture of pride. They talked, slowly rebuilding what had been lost. Tom asked about Jamie, about Ezra's art, about who he was. It wasn't easy. Tom stumbled, asked clumsy questions, but he listened, and that was enough. Jamie and Ezra grew closer, their love a quiet revolution in a town that wasn't ready for them. They painted murals on the shelter's walls during visits, organized art shows for queer youth, turned their pain into something beautiful. Ezra's mother was with him in every brushstroke, her love a light that never faded. He wore his rainbow pin, not as a challenge, but as a truth. And Tom, in his own way, began to wear it to a small flag on his work jacket, a silent stand. Years later, Ezra would look back on Willow Creek as the place where he'd lost everything and found himself. He and Jamie moved to Chicago, chasing their dreams, but they returned often to visit Tom, who'd become a gruff but fierce ally. The town hadn't changed much, but Ezra had. He'd learned that home wasn't a place or even a persona. It was the courage to be himself, to love without apology, to build a family from the pieces of a broken past. As Ezra stood at his mother's grave one spring, a sketchbook under his arm, he felt her pride. He'd made it through the storm, not alone, but with Jamie's hand in his, Tom's awkward hugs, and the memory of a woman who'd taught him to paint the world with his truth. The rainbow flag fluttered in the breeze, a promise kept,